We refer to this webinar as the science of business building, and I'll explain what I mean by that. There is science in business building, and maybe my greatest hope here is that I can convince you of such a thing in the next, say, 40 minutes or so. This is what I really like to do. I'd like to introduce TrueSpace, the firm that my daughter Jamie and I founded 10 years ago in June of 2013. And this research effort that we've invested in is influence. It could influence a lot of things in the way we build businesses. I would love for what I show you today to potentially influence how you see your business if you're building one, or if you're helping others, and its capability to grow predictably. Those are some really key words for us here at TrueSpace around the term predictability. And lastly, I want to show you how science can increase your confidence in three finite resources of time, capital, and talent. So it's about that simple and about that complex. That's really what I'd like to kind of take you through today. So again, thanks for that. I think what I want to do is go through probably this presentation and then open this up, Stacy, to some dialogue. So if you're gathering some questions, I'd hope I actually encourage a few questions from this esteemed group. So
you are, and what's fun is seeing where these people are joining us from. We even have someone from the UK. So
I love that.
we have Colorado, we have Missouri, we have Colorado, we have the UK. Lots of fun people joining us. So I'm excited.
How perfect. So the name TrueSpace, the name of the firm that we founded, came from the space between those that are starting a business and those that are attempting to scale. So we're not the data I show you today is not from the startup world. It's those that are basically in between those two places. We think it's a coveted spot. We also think it's a very distinct spot relative to data. And that's what I get a chance to show you with a little bit today. So let's start with some numbers. I'm so full of numbers now that I've spent 10 years with Gallup and thousands and thousands of firms. I think about Malcolm Gladwell's world of 10,000 hours, and I don't know how many thousands of hours I've got into this, but it's a lot. So, but let's see if I can set a baseline of understanding of where in the marketplace that I'm speaking about today. Arguably, there's 30 million U.S. firms. That vacillates between 29.5 and 31 million firms in the U.S. Those are corporations, LLCs, and so forth. Of those 30 million firms, think about the size and shape of 30 million firms. Only 6 have more than 5 employees. So only 6 million of the 30 are employers, which means 24 million U.S. firms that operate in the country have less than 5 people. Mostly are single or sole proprietorships. So let's talk about the 6 million for a second. There's 3% of the 6 million, roughly 178,000 companies that have more than 10 million in revenue. It's breathtaking when you think about this based on the way we speak about business and size and shape in the US today, because 180, firms divided by 50, that's how many, if you just did a linear, shot across the US, not a lot of companies are there. This includes the largest firms, ExxonMobil, and others that are great big firms, all the way down to the one that just passed 10 million in revenues. And of those firms, 4 out of 5 were bootstrapped. Now, bootstrapped for us at TrueSpace means you may have taken some early seed capital. You might have had friends and family around. You might have cashed in your 401k, whatever it is, but you're not taking professional capital. So 80% of the firms that make it got there in kind of a different route. And that's what I'm going to represent today. And those that get there on average spent 12 years to do so. That's actually regression to the mean versus an average, but 12 years, you think about that. I think I saw Mick Freeman's face on our thing. I can't see it now, but imagine going to an investor meeting and saying, I got this great plan, this really cool idea. It's just going to take me 12 years. So anyway, what am I trying to do with this data is I'm trying to get you grounded in what I'm going to show you today, because I think we can influence a different narrative in the US. So let's just keep drilling down a little bit. Of all of that population that I just talked about, 2.1 million firms are in TrueSpace. They're in the space between starting and scaling. That's 64 million jobs. Roughly, if you were driving down the freeway today in a metropolitan area and you looked at the cars next to you, 4 of 10 of them are going to a business that has roughly less than 100 employees. 40% of jobs are coming from there. And you think about this, there's 160 million people employed in the US. we don't care much about these companies as a nation. For most of us that navigate our firms into this space, there's just not a lot of help. And so we're kind of dedicating a lot of our life to try to figure these things out. There's a narrative that we're fighting against. And if there's something that you take from this presentation today, this is probably one of the greatest problems we have, not just nationally, but probably just on a global basis. The seeking of a unicorn, this rapid, fast growth. We have over 2,700 accelerators, people that go to an accelerator like Y Combinator and others across the country. Everything's accelerate, rapid, hyper growth. And yet the data suggests that rapid growth is what's killing businesses. The Inc. 5000, for example, fired their top economist a few years ago because he had identified that the top third in the Inc. 5000 either die, don't grow, or never make it into their third year at the Inc. 5000. There's some great articles. Dr. Eric George was on our panel with Gallup, wrote an article recently of why rapid growth basically is killing businesses. I'm trying to make that argument a little bit today, but I'm also trying to bring a solution. I'm not trying to just judge the fact that maybe we're pushing businesses faster than they should be growing. And what we really mean by rapid growth is when you outrun three resources. You outrun your capability of spending time in the right areas, capital to actually support this, and talent that can actually fulfill the business as it grows. So that's what I'm going against today, is this narrative, and I think I can change it. I think I can use your help with your influence. That's why we invited you to this webinar today, because we can change the narrative from rapid to predictable growth. I'm an advocate of hustle. I want to see people actually find a way to build very, very valuable businesses. I just want them to show up and make it through the process. And that's the essence of what I'm going to do today. So all of that's kind of a tee up. Now what I really would like to do is to say, can I get your mind ready to see some new information before I just throw some maybe counterintuitive information at you? I'd like to just get your mind malleable. I know a number of you, it's great to see some names I haven't talked to in a few years, but let's get our minds clear just on what's possible today. Knowing that we have science and we have a lot of experience that we can lean on. I'm a aeronautical engineer by education, kind of a space junkie, a big, fan of, the astrophysicists that are out doing some certain things today. But I wanted to just give you, most of us have lived in this period of time. In 1990, we launched the first space telescope. It was the Hubble scope, named after, of course, Dr. Hubble, that in 1920 discovered that there was a very expansive universe. But the Hubble telescope that we put in 1990 was breakthrough because we could see for the first time ultraviolet light completely unfiltered in space, away from Earth. So the picture on the left that you see here is the Hubble telescope. Ultraviolet light, if you know about the light spectrums and protons, violet light right before it basically it exhausts itself has the most energy. That's why you see it. Literally ultraviolet comes across as white. So you see this picture, it's much more vivid than anything that we've ever seen on standing on Earth, even at the highest mountains that we can stand in. But recently, of course, we brought in the James Webb telescope that looks at infrared in addition to ultraviolet. And we now know, so in 1990, we thought there were 100 billion galaxies, 100 billion galaxies. We now think there's 10 times that number of galaxies. The only galaxies we can see, of course, are the two that were in the Milky Way and Andromeda. So just imagine if we can continue to push our minds a little bit around what's possible, what we can see. And so that's what I'm going to take you through today, is what's maybe an example that's more practical, I guess, than this James Webb telescope. And it goes back to my work as an aeronautical engineer and really fighting against some of the mental models that kept us from flying an aircraft or navigating an aircraft more accurately from literally one airport to another across all of these things. Just as a point of reference, on any given day, 87,000 flights take off and land in the US. The last time we had a major air catastrophe on commercial aircraft was in 2008. So pretty accurate way to go. But in 1895, the president of the Royal Society, those of you that are scientists or thermodynamicists know that there's Lord Kelvin. The Royal Society's been around since Isaac Newton was president of it. And it's the seminal set of thinkers across the world that get together and basically pontificate what they think are the greatest theorems and results of their work. Stephen Hawking was probably one of our more recent ones. Elon Musk just joined, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. So imagine the president of all scientists in 1895 making a declaration that heavier than air flying machines are impossible. At that point in time in 1895, I want you to kind of grasp this real quickly. We had transcontinental railroads. You could go from New York to Chicago in 6 hours on a railroad. We had the basis of telephony or telephones that we have today. Chemistry, we could convert oil into kerosene and gasoline. We could do all kinds of things. But for some reason, we couldn't figure out how to fly something that's heavier than a balloon from point A to point B. We could throw gliders around, but there was discriminate flight, right, of where they went to. And the reason that we were stuck is what we saw of what we would copy. The best scientists in the world, the best aerodynamic designers of the world were trying to copy a seagull. They thought it was the essence of flight was the seagull. And so everything that we did, we tried to copy basically what this bird was doing while it was in air, because it's definitely heavier than air. Leonardo da Vinci, if you go back that far, had developed an ornithopter. I can't even imagine an aircraft today that flies with wings going up and down, but that's what we were trying to copy. With all of this breakthroughs, with all the scientists, the best scientists in the world. And of course, in 1895, we had these crazy brothers from Dayton, Ohio, that decided to go down to North Carolina and try to figure this out. So the long and the short of it is that we were stuck for hundreds of years because we kept trying to copy birds. But literally more than 100 years before that, we had the solution. We couldn't see it. And that is from a fluid dynamicist called Daniel Bernoulli. Those of you that are mathematicians might recall nervously the Bernoulli equation. But the long and the short of it is that the air we kept trying to copy and throw things into is mostly a fluid, or it reacts as a fluid. And once we figured out that we could understand the way a fluid flows over an object or a wing of an aircraft, we could learn how to navigate that aircraft. We could figure that out pretty quickly. And we did that once we decided to basically look in a different direction. We saw something in a different form. And this is what I learned in my first early days at Boeing after 7 years of education at the collegiate level, that this is really the essence of what we were trying to do, was basically to look at the pressure of a fluid flowing over an object. And you can see that a shark and a ray and others look a lot more like what we are flying today across the country. My message to you before I dive into my research today is, what if we could see our businesses with just a little bit different lens? What if we could see potentially our businesses as something that was a fish versus a bird? And it's amazing once we see that, what we're capable of. From 1895 to 1907, we developed aircraft to such an extent that we could deliver mail with them. By the First World War, 1917 and 18, we had 150 aircraft for an Air Force. And in during the Great Depression, we developed the jet engine, and today we fly 87,000 flights from point A to point B. So what I'm trying to tell you is, what I'm going to show you in a minute is basically a fish, and we keep seeing birds relative to job growth, relative to our business growth, relative to how we use our time as business builders, our capital, and our people. So that's why I went through this introduction at the beginning. Plus, I like talking about it. So, so transitioning, what is the role of the CEO or a founder if we're going to look at predictable growth versus just rapid growth, basically growing as fast as we can on the top line of the business? I believe it's this, and that is to create the capability within your business and to become operationally predictable. So it's not anymore forecasting rapid growth, it's actually capability creation. And there's a way to do that with what I'm going to show you with science. There's a way to look at this with data versus just emotion and judgment to find out if basically we can get our businesses built in a more predictable way. So we have two laws at TrueSpace. Law one, things like Captain Obvious. A lot of people have made this claim: for your business to grow, you first must grow. I think Gandhi and Mohammed and some others had come up with this. The second one is a little bit more profound and maybe a little bit heavier. That is that your business today, at any point in time, is perfectly designed to produce the results that you see. If you're stuck, it's designed to be stuck. If you're having difficulty growing, it's designed to be difficult to grow. If you can't retain talent, all those issues that you have, you designed it that way. You just can't see it. So it's not judgment. It's just a point of law that we can change this, because if we could change the design within your firm potentially and the way in which you're using time, capital, and talent, I think you're going to see some different results in your business. So now let me transition into what we're doing with research at TrueSpace. We call it using science and data to build your business. I talked about the space between starting and scaling. We have a long history of thousands of companies in a database that we've been able to study for years. I think maybe that's the biggest difference of what I'm going to show you today, is that this data was not a survey. It wasn't what you were thinking today. It was literally living with you over a decade of time and studying the patterns of behavior over that period of time. So we had the dubious opportunity to present research that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes on the stage at Gallup's headquarters in February 20th of 2020, literally 2.5 weeks before the nation shut down. We didn't know this when we started working with the Gallup organization, that you have to defend the research in front of the public, academia, and the media on a stage that was George Washington's Masonic Temple. It's right across from the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. And upon successful defense of the research, you can use Gallup's name, but if you don't defend it successfully, you can't use their name. So anyway, that was after the study, but we were lucky. We had the New York Times pick up, did an exclusive article, ran that article. We have, of course, Gallup Inc. magazine was all over this. But what I want to do is I want to take you through kind of some excerpts of that, but then give you kind of what's happened in the last 4 years. So that's my intention in the next few minutes. So we talk about longitudinal or long-term projects relative to a qualitative study. There's 3 things that I'm going to present to you today. Thing 1 is a 4-year longitudinal qualitative gathering of literally living with 150 firms. Thing 2 is a quantitative validation of the quantitative work or qualitative work of 2,500 companies. And thing 3 is a 4-year field test of using this information and seeing what results actually take place inside of those companies. That's the 10 years that we've been at this. So where we started was really from a position of naivete. I can't tell you how naive we were to think that 150 companies was going to be small enough to manage. The amount of information and data that we got out of 150 firms in 48 months is one thing I'll go back if right before my death and look at my body and just say what kind of wear and tear did it put on us. But essentially, we contracted with 150 firms from October of 2014 to November of 2018. We put $50,000 into the firm. At the time, the $7.5 million investment seemed like a lot, but to them, it was enough capital for us to get full transparency of their business. We used 2 research constructs. Those of you who are familiar with qualitative structure, ethnography is the most structured, qualitative, long-term data gathering method there is. Xerox developed this years ago. Steve Jobs made it popular. He and Wozniak developed the mouse using ethnography. And the other thing we used was system dynamics. With my relationship with the MIT System Dynamics Lab, we were able to use a lot of the simulations that they had back at the time. The most important part of this slide that you're looking at is the last bullet, and that is that we painstakingly tried to find companies that were at 2 million in revenues, knowing that when we started the research, we wanted everybody to have kind of a fair start. It was like a single starting line. You hit the gun and everybody starts running and you could compare. And that's what took us 1.5 years to actually get those companies ready to go, find the right size companies across the country. And so we did. We basically started companies in that process. And so what we were really looking for within that were systems. We knew going in with a hypothesis, a thesis, that there were systems in a company that we could see feedback from over a protracted period or longitudinal period of time. So things literally like we discovered why companies in this mix were turning over their top salesperson every 18 months. Why retention of customers were better in some companies than others that literally served the same market with almost the same product. we got to see all of this literally unfold right in front of us. And the reason we wanted to basically look at systems is that we wanted to see patterns. What were the patterns of behavior of the way you hired and fired, the way you attracted, the way you actually went into a market, the way you presented your information to your employees and all stakeholders? How did this look across the business? And how did it influence behavior? And how did it influence your financial performance? That's really what we were able to see month over month for 48 months. That's what we were able to discover. And it was mind-blowing what we finally discovered. So what came to pass is that we found systems inside of a company that have a tight parallel to the systems within your body. So if you're in the medical profession, which I saw some people clicking in, which I know you are, I built a business in healthcare. We take the human body, which is this incredibly complex, structured set of systems, and we pull 11 systems kind of apart so we can go use them for mostly diagnosis and treatment, specialty, education, all those things. And you can see them, respiratory, for example, and cardiovascular, digestive, lymphatic. You can kind of relate to them. Well, in order to use a language to talk about them, we use the language of systems language of stocks and flows. So if you were to take the cardiovascular system, a stock is the heart. It collects blood. But the flow is what changes the value of that collection of blood. And the flow is not blood, it's actually temperature, viscosity, and pressure. So we can look at the cardiovascular system in many cases in that light. And the same, I'm going to show you a minute, we can look at your business the same way. So assume for a minute we could take your business and look at your business in a way we could diagnose and treat a set of systems. And what we've been able to do is to do that. And we do it in a framework. The framework basically has this structure. There's a question that goes in that says, what really is influencing this? So for example, if we were to take the circulation operating condition, in other words, the operating condition is what has to take place literally for blood to flow into the heart, it's circulation. Can we continuously provide oxygen throughout the body is the question that we ask. The stock, the accumulation of this could be the heart, and the flow would be venous blood pressure and viscosity. So you can kind of see the way this flows. So the reason I'm doing this is that my way of doing this is that these are the 12 systems that we found in every business that is growing predictably in our study set that are now over 3,000 companies in the set. So just like your body, I can actually go in with data predictably now and look at these systems. And I'm going to take you through this framework here in a second. And these are the systems that we found over this longitudinal period of time, which is now 10 years in the making. We saw the 12 systems in 2019 when we kind of intersected with Gallup and with our qualitative data. And of course, we've been using this, and we found 12 systems then, and we haven't found a 13th, and we haven't reduced it to 11. So we've been able to really put this in motion into a framework that you can use. So assuming that we use the same framework as we were with the human body, this is the framework that we call the 5 conditions framework. Same thing I was doing with the circulatory system. There's a Socratic question. If you follow my cursor, is your business ready and capable of growing? There's a condition that has to take place. Are you using time, capital, and talent effectively? We call that alignment. The stocks, the systems are also the stock names of direction, focus, and structure. And the things that influence the value of that stock are these in the flows. There's 30 flows and there's 12 stocks. So the point being is that I realize this gets a little thick and complex quickly, but I can pull it apart now, just like I could if I was treating your digestive system versus your cardiovascular system. And I can do that in your business, and I can start looking at the health of these 12 systems. So that's really what we're going to be able to do here in a second. So we took the qualitative data. We've been at this for basically 4+ years, and we intersected with the Gallup organization. I can now state, after working with them for the better part of a half a decade, there's no better place to go if you really want math validation of your data. They are literally the world's experts, and they're the only ones, in my opinion, that could reach 2,500 people for a full study of the data. So we partnered with Gallup to really do 3 things. The first thing is to take our ethnographic study, which was the qualitative work, and mathematically validate it in a pilot. So we took 51 entrepreneurs that were remaining in our data set, and put them through some rigor. They got paid to do it, luckily. But they validated with 160 data items that the model that I just showed you, this framework, the stocks and flows, can actually predict performance. So if we look at it qualitatively and all the data we had qualitatively, we can now say that if you actually increase the potential, or in this case, the capability of the 12 systems, it actually increases performance. So they then what we did is we said, we need to really take this to the marketplace across the US. We would love to have all 50 states involved and 2,500 entrepreneurs. And they basically found 2,500 entrepreneurs to do this. And the output of that is the most predictable instrument they've built since 2008, which was StrengthsFinders. So it's a predictive instrument, and it can determine your business's capability to utilize those 12 systems for growth. So things that we see that are healthcare related would be literally an MRI of some major system that you're looking at, potentially some real lipid diagnostic of your blood systems and things like that. I have that level of capability with the data set we have. We're getting better every single day by doing this. But businesses that have a high score in our assessment are 3 times more likely to grow next year than those that have a lower score. The threshold number is 53. It's a nonlinear scoring set. So that's what I'm going to be able to kind of take you through here in the next few minutes. So the results of the validation look this way. Remember, there were 5 conditions that flow into the 12 systems. So if you're into statistics, the reliability score is 0.876. The alpha scores that followed that, I have one for all 5 conditions. That's where we know we're 10 points higher than much bigger models. The predictive value of this assessment is really the combination of all 5. So what determines capability in large part are the scores in alignment and discipline. Interestingly enough, what determines value creation is predictability, which is an outcome of alignment and discipline. So the whole system itself becomes connected, and no different than the human body. I need my circulatory system to operate with my digestive system, which connects to my nervous system. It's the same kind of idea. So that's what we're able to do when we put this model together. There was 3 distinct stages that were born from the research. So first of all, the 5 conditions are not equal. The 12 systems are not equal. So what we were able to see is that the stages of companies were also not equal. 82% of our 2,500 companies, which are a statistical representation of 2.1 million businesses in the US between starting and scaling, fall into what we know as emerging. We couldn't come up with a better term than that, other than they're basically a business that still has a lot of startup hangovers, things that are inconsistent growth, turnover, difficulty actually getting a value proposition in there, low close ratio numbers in their CRM. That's kind of an emerging business. So it's a bit daunting to think that my body of work here, that 8 out of 10 businesses that we start with are really struggling with predictable growth. You can come into TrueSpace and work with us as an emerging business. In fact, sometimes you're in better shape to do so than if you're doing really well. But it doesn't matter. There's no statistical determinant of how many years you've been in business. You could be an emerging stage business and be 40 years into your journey. You could be a remodeling business and be 3 years into it. So it's not determinant of how long you've been in business. And it also is not determinant by industry, and it's not determinant by size. So kind of interesting set of data that when we start looking at this, that all these things that we thought about were size, shape, revenues, all those things. But the next thing that we saw was a 15% set in our body research called remodeling. It's where I want to get most businesses that are working in TrueSpace today. It's a narrow band of performance that literally shows repeat performance, and repeat performance is what we call scale. That's basically where we start seeing businesses that were stuck at 2 million, reach 5, reach 7, reach 10. Not hyper growth, but nice, consistent growth. And the last thing we asked Gallup to do, thing 3, was to build a benchmark that you can compare your business against. And that allows you to say, where am I relative to a business that has been growing at least 25% year over year for 3 years, that 4 years ago was between 1 and 10 million in revenues, and the regression to the mean in that data set of 120 companies is 32 million in revenue. So it's aspirational. Compare my business against them, and I want to find out where I stand. Where do I fit? So that's where we brought all of this to the table, and then we started putting it into some formatting of things that we could do to affect basically where we make our decisions. So the assessment comes out looking like this. I think I have enough time to take you into our data set today. Maybe not. I've been a little verbose today, a little excited about this, but if you were in our platform today, this is kind of the formatting of it. So if you follow my cursor, this marker here, this blue marker is the score of 53. That is the threshold for getting into what we call remodeling. Everybody below this is emerging and denotes in the color purple. In between these two is 15 points. This is basically companies that scored from 54 to 62. And the final 3%, which are what we consider the benchmark businesses, are there. So imagine if this were a scale, it either climbs really fast and levels at the top, or if it's an inverted scale, it would actually dive really quickly and then level at the bottom. So it's a nonlinear form of scale. When you get to 53, you're literally in the top 20% of all businesses in the US that are operating in our zone. So the other thing we can look at then is the individual scoring across each one of the operating conditions of alignment, discipline, predictability, endurance, and value creation. We can start comparing where you fit against the benchmark businesses that we ultimately would like to get you there. Stacy, since she's joined us, has come up with a new term for our data, our visualization format. She calls this the MRI, and I kind of like it. So what are you looking at? We call it the shape of your business, but it's the 12 systems. Remember the 12 systems that I spent all that time describing to you, and probably an infinitum. Direction, focus, structure. It starts at noon, basically at 12 o'clock, and goes in clockwise, basically in level of influence in your capability of growing. The outside band, that gold band, is the Gallup 120 companies that form a benchmark. And the lowest scoring of those create this threshold between the dark gold and maybe the pale color in here. And the purple is the combined composite shape of 97 questions that have been asked, 4 different question types, roughly 14,400 variations of data that show you in one shape the capability of your business to use those 12 systems and where you are relative to the benchmark. So you can see that it's visible. And the best thing we have here is no judgment, no opinion. It's just, this is it. This is where you are. And I love this because it's like going in back to those systems and getting your blood pressure. And your blood pressure is your blood pressure. It's there. It's something you've done to create the blood pressure, good, bad, or wherever. And this is your business's capability to use those 12 systems effectively and to use the 12 systems to grow predictably. The other thing that we can see, of course, is that your executive team took the same assessment, and we can see the individual scores relative to the capability they see from the role they play. This is not behavioral, it's not attitudinal, and it's not performance, it's capability. The questions that Gallup designed for us in an algorithm, not a survey, but an algorithm, literally ask you questions based on your job role relative to the capability within the 12 systems. So that's what we can see from the very surface of this. And then we can break it down into that structure. Remember the structure from the 12 systems? This is the operating condition. These are the 3 systems: direction, focus, and structure. These are the flows, and I can see it all the way down to this granular level of where you score, and we can start looking at places that we want to go influence. We can't work on everything at once. This is literally a picture right from our data set. Where would we start? So how do we use this? And if you're in TrueSpace and you come in and work basically as a member of TrueSpace, we start working within the systems that we see no different than any type of change in a business. And what I want to show you is what happens over the next few years at TrueSpace, because we get to use the baseline data that I just showed you to see if you're actually building capability. This is an example of a firm that's now in the top 3%. They're in the benchmark. You can see the scoring set there. but most importantly, you can see what changes in their purple shape. A business that in essence went from less than $1 million in revenues to 7, I think, million, not rapid growth. It took 3 years to get there, but they're using the 12 systems to run their business collectively. And the balance in the 12 is more important than just high performance in one versus low in another. And I'll show you that here. Yeah, I think I've got enough time today to do that. So the other thing that you can see is you start seeing the alignment from from your team. So you get a bigger team as you grow, you got more people involved in it, but they start seeing the capability of the system or of your business to use those 12 systems for growth. That's one of the greatest statistical indicators of capability of continuing to grow on a year-over-year basis. It's so fun to watch this. It's all data. So a great example, you can start comparing basically where you started and all your financial performance, your team's performance, all those things from one year to the next. You can start seeing that shape change over time. We had our exemplar award winner, a company called Movement X out of the Beltway, that's grown literally over 4 years now, is in our benchmark space, and it's kind of fun to watch the story be built with the MRI or the shape of the business, Stacy. So the most important decision is where will you invest your time? And the next set of information that we have that I think is kind of interesting is I capture not just that 12 systems, but I capture what you're doing and spending your time relative to the 12 systems. One of the best pieces of information we have is our calendars because it's a track record. You can go back now so simply and say, what was I doing the last 3 months? Where was I spending my time? And strategically, it may be the most important resource we have to determine whether you can grow your business in a predictable way. So we start capturing this. We now have thousands of these of entrepreneurs that are showing us as they change the shape of where they're spending their time. So remember the emerging businesses, 82% of firms basically are having difficulty growing. We believe step one is to look at where the founders are spending their time. And this is, if you were a bodybuilder, this would be a really cool shape, but this is the shape of a company that's struggling to grow because literally in this case, 60 to 70% of their time is spent up on the top of this. They're involved in sales, operations, all the development of new products and services, and very little time in the business. So they're working in their business. They're working to grow their business. This is what we're seeing. So I'll show you this picture again in a second. The second is that when we move to remodeling, we start seeing a market shift between where they were spending their time. Most of us spend roughly 2,600 to 2,800 hours in our businesses each year. There's very few of us that are working 40 hours, 5-day weeks to build a business. But if you start shifting 15 to 20% of the time, and you think that there's 2,600 hours, you can do the quick math in your head. You're talking about the movement of hundreds of hours of a year with not a lot of major shift in your week, but it's intentional. The thickening of this in the middle is really important because you're now starting to spend much more time on the business and the people within your business. So you're starting to bring other people in to do the work that you were doing before. And those that are actually growing at a predictable rate of 25% year over year for a minimum of 3 years have this shape. And it's kind of mind-blowing. And the thing that I was thinking about is how little time they spend on fundraising, how little time they spend on board of directors versus those that are struggling. They've got somebody else that's capturing customers at a predictable rate. They've got other leaders that are keeping customers at a predictable rate. And they're moving into building the people of the business versus building the business. And it's such a shift. And we see this, we map this then with the data set of financial performance, and it's mind-blowing. If you shift your time, you will shift the performance of your business. You can't do it overnight. We ask when you come into TrueSpace and come through our program, I'd like to shift 200 total hours in a year from basically the top into the middle if you're there, and to start getting you into much more of a shape like this. Granted, when I was thinking about, we don't use a Pareto chart. We actually put this out for an intentional reason, but from a body perspective, not a great idea. You've been drinking a lot of beer or something, you're fattening up in the middle, but that's kind of what I want to do, is I want to get you there relative to where you're spending your time. So let's look at the comparison. I think this is the thing that when Stacy came on board, she's like, wow, this is incredible. So just think about the middle of this versus the top and the bottom of where you're shifting literally a couple hundred hours a year in this arena. This is what I want you to be able to see when you start with the work at TrueSpace, because again, we're not shifting everything. We're shifting things that we believe will have the greatest impact on your ability to grow predictably. So a couple wrap-up slides here. I started out trying to get you to see potentially your business in a different way. I'm a real believer that we need to not so much slow down, but we need to be much more intentional with where we spend time, invest capital, and use people. It's time, capital, and talent, or the three resources that we talk about. So if you can start seeing your business potentially as a fish versus a bird, or just see it in a different way, and to possibly use some data to do it, I think it could set you free, because you can stop doubting yourself. You can stop wondering, where should I be spending my time? And maybe stop waking up 4 out of 5 days like I do, going, should I spend my time here or there? Where am I going? Why am I doing this? What's my guide as we look at this? And then lastly is that our impact is really why I invited you all to this. And Stacy, thanks for doing the same. If just 10% of the companies we're working with today could move from emerging to remodeling, from purple to blue, just from purple to blue, we'd create roughly 17 million new jobs in the US. I mean, I think about impact. I think about, where am I going to spend my life and why am I doing this, and the influence that you all have. That's what I want to click into, is so many of you can make a change. And I'd love to just supply some information and data to you. And that's what this whole thing's all about at the end of the day. So anyway, thank you. I do want to leave some time for questions instead of diving into this, and we can pick up later if you guys have in the data set.